Welcome to the Keeping It Teal podcast. We are the CCU sports podcast that truly keeps it teal 24/7. I'm your host, Hunter Santiago. I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, AJ Moran and Jay Largent. Ladies and gentlemen of Teal Nation, we may have lost the battle, but we have not lost the war. Army ran all over our team for a full football game of 4 quarters. Sure, I was a little depressed at the end, but I think the most reassuring thing, for me at least, was we hung in there and made it a one possession loss by the end of the game. We didn't let them just kick our ass entirely. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot in my reflection of this loss on the road on Army Senior Day was when it comes to the past to Coastal Carolina, pre-McCall era, this team couldn't make a bowl game even if they wanted to. During that stint that we had after going from FCS to FBS, we had so many years of 3 to 4 give or take wins a season at most. I myself was a freshman, sophomore, and junior for seasons just like that. It wasn't fun. You didn't really want to go to football games. You didn't really, talk smack with other people. It was very rare that if somebody else was your friend at another Sunbelt school that you would even want to discuss football with them. It wasn't the same. We went through many quarterbacks who, unfortunately, no disrespect, I'm not going to name anyone in particular, but couldn't throw a ball more than 30 yards. I was in the student section in multiple games where we could have won. We were like down by one possession. All you need to do was lob it up. You had a receiver wide open in the end zone, but this quarterback was too scared to throw the ball. I mean, that is just what Coastal, for somebody who had been there pre-McCall era, was like. And I know Jay can attest to that. But kind of speeding things up for y'all, just think about it this way. Coastal is bowl eligible 4 years in a row. Sure, by record, this is our worst season of the McCall era with 4 losses. But that doesn't mean that we aren't a great football program, a solid program in the Sun Belt. Heck, we're competing for the Sun Belt East title this week for a chance to go to the Sun Belt Championship against Troy. Again, hopefully that would be a really fun game to compete against them again. We lost our head coach who went to Liberty and is currently having an undefeated season. Props to him. But we got a head coach who came and brought 50 new players onto our team in Tim Beck. Yes, earlier in the season, a lot of this wasn't ideal. Nobody wanted to see that loss to Georgia State, nor did they want to see the 4-turnover or 5-turnover game against Georgia Southern. But that UCLA game, I think we can all attest, was a fun game to watch. There's a few things that we need to clean up, but we competed with a Power 5 team through and throughout. One who's in a really dominant Pac-12 team in the final year of the Pac-12. But overall, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's something to note that if we are Coastal Carolina fans who are saying our team sucks and we're not supporting them, we're not showing up to Brooks, and we're saying this is an awful year, I think that's just a terrible mindset to have. We are bowl eligible. We are 1 game away from being in the Sun Belt Conference Championship. Sure, I would hope that from years going forward that, Beck, tightens up the team. We get a little bit better. We don't have like the kind of losses we've been having. Maybe no losses, 1 losses, or 2 loss seasons in the future. But if this is the worst season of the McCall era, and maybe hopefully one of the worst seasons in Tim Beck's future, we can say that in the worst season, we still at our final game have a chance to claim the Sun Belt East and potentially the Sun Belt Championship. And that is something that we should be proud of, something we should be excited for. A bowl game right around the corner as well. I'm still excited. That Army game wasn't ideal. And for my final point to hit home to y'all for my Army breakdown before I send it over to the guys, we've had 3 quarterbacks starting for us this season. Well, this is a narrative that you don't see pushed through Twitter or X, YouTube, and some of these sports podcasts, or just even on ESPN. You don't see them talking about the Chants having a chance to go to the Sun Belt Conference Championship, where we've had 3 different quarterbacks who started for us this season. They just think we fell off. Well, in reality, most people ruled us out the second McCall got hurt. All right. We turned this shit around. We have quarterbacks who can ball, and we have a coach that can recruit really good players to this team, including Vasco, who is currently undefeated as a starting quarterback for Coastal Carolina. So those are my overall thoughts for the Army game and the season so far leading into this week. I'm going to pass over the guys to give you the rest of their Army review. AJ, what do you got?
Yes, Hunter, like you said, a little bit of a disappointing one this past week. Fortunately and unfortunately, being from New York, I took the trip up there for the day, and not the end of the game that we wanted. Not the turnout that we wanted. However, I will say it is beautiful up there at West Point, especially this time of year. So if you have the chance, go take that trip. It was awesome. It was a great experience. Although, like I said, we didn't get the result we wanted. And going from this background here, this was the play they had to face that whole game basically, and they couldn't find a way to do it. There's a lot to break down in this game. All right, special teams, they had that blocked punt for a touchdown. Right, in those close games, you can't have those. Those are big momentum shifters. Offense, they were like average, very average. And when you play Army, when they run the ball as much as they do and they burn that much clock, you only get a handful of possessions, and you have to make every possession count. And they just didn't do that. They scored a lot of touchdowns, right? They kept it close, but they had a big interception late in that game. Jared Guest wasn't as clean as he probably needed to be. We didn't run the ball as effectively, right? These are all things that factor in. Like I said, when you play Army, you only get a handful of possessions, and you probably have to score on, basically all those possessions. You have to come away with points if you want to hang with them. You didn't really do that. Defensive, good news, 0 passing yards. We did a job there. Bad news, we gave over 365 in rushing. The fact of the matter is we just were not prepared. I think even Tim Beck said it. They just were not expecting the option offense, which I said before the week, right? I know that they have been running a little bit of a different style of offense, but whenever you play Army or Navy, you have to expect at least a couple option looks. And I saw just from like that first drive that they just were not, ready for that option. And it is tough. That is, you basically have to prepare all week to face an offense like that, right? There's a lot of things to break down. Some other things that factored in was that you're missing Shane Bruce and Juan Powell, right? 2 linebackers, in a run heavy offense don't make things easier. But like I said, they just didn't come to play on Saturday. Vasco obviously didn't play either, right? That's the guy that we thought was going to be the quarterback. He didn't have him. And we don't know exactly what the reason may be. We're normally a team that's good against the run, but not good against the option. These are all things that weren't so great. But on the good side of things, there are a couple pros to take from this. Like Hunter said, we find a way to kept it close. We hung in a little bit, which is not easy to do when they're putting up 400 rushing yards on you and they're just pounding you. Find a way to keep it close is good. And also from me being there in person, there was a ton of Coastal fans in attendance. So that I was surprised by the amount of Coastal fans that were there. So that's good. I like to see the nation being teal as per always. But Jay, what did you take away from this game?
Obviously, it's a very disappointing game, but you can't fault the effort of the team. I mean, they could have rolled over and died like they've done in previous years after that block punt, but just still keep fighting and keep it close. Obviously, hats off to the guys and the coaching staff to keep it with a 1-score game, and everything that is in reach is still in reach this coming weekend. I just want to see how the team responds after a tough defeat in West Point last Saturday.
Now that we've got kind of our feelings out in the air, our thoughts and our perspectives of how the Army game went and our season has gone so far, let's transition over to JMU and our James Madison preview. Now, as of right now, Tim Beck on Wednesday announced that Jared Guest is most likely going to be the starter, but Vasco is healthy and preparing for the chance to compete to be the starter, but has not fully announced who 100% the starter will be on Saturday. That is my biggest concern going into this game, believe it or not. Listen, and I pointed this out on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it. I have no ill thoughts towards Jared Guest for his performance against Army. I just personally feel that Vasco, this team rallies around him so much better. And the style of offense that we run with Ethan Vasco is just it's the kind of offense that we need to run to beat teams like James Madison and potentially Troy if we can even beat James Madison. That's not to say that I don't think we will, but it's definitely going to be a real rough game. Could be a shootout or could be a low scoring one. I really don't know. It will be something that we'll have to determine and discuss throughout this podcast. But overall, yeah, no, Ethan Vasco brings a running style to the offense that would have gotten us more yards against Army and decreased the play clock during that game, maybe made it even more closer. But also, just when you look after the games where Ethan Vasco started, where all the guys get on his TikTok and do the little trend that he has going on. I'm not even going to try and describe it, but it's really funny. A lot of people in the UK do that trend as well. But it feels like this team truthfully rallies around Vasco, and he feels like the starting quarterback potentially of the future, pending, what we get in the transfer portal and how Blake Boda shapes out. But, I think realistically, you got to ride the hot hand. If Ethan Vasco is healthy, he's undefeated as our quarterback when he's starting. So why not roll with that? That's not to say that Guest isn't good, because I think he has clearly shown he's improved a ton under Tim Beck. But just because Jared Guest is good and has improved, that doesn't mean that he is better than Ethan Vasco. And I think that's a point that we as Sean fans need to kind of make publicly, is like, we're not necessarily dissing Jared Guest by saying we don't want him to start. I just think you have the better option currently on the roster. And it's a great thing to have when you have multiple solid quarterbacks on your team, right? You can't complain, especially for the Sun Belt. Oh my goodness. But yeah, no, I mean, I would really love to see Ethan Vasco out there. I know the Chance fans would really love to see Grayson McCall out there, but unfortunately he's listed as doubtful and very unlikely to kind of go out there and even probably play any snaps, because he, at least through Monday and Tuesday, was no contact in practice, according to Tim Beck. So I would assume that kind of played out through the rest of the week. But yeah, no, I mean, that's kind of what we're looking at with the quarterbacks going into James Madison. So let's throw it over to the guys. What do you guys see through James Madison's season so far, and stats and stuff to talk about? Jay, what do you got?
Obviously, they're 10-1, 6-1 in the Sun Belt Conference. They suffered a heartbreaker last week to App State when they hosted College Game Day. They're all come in hungry and want to make another statement to the NCAA and also the whole Sun Belt, and saying why they should be in the conference championship and also a bowl game. But we got to come out physical, ready to play, because we know what happened last year when we didn't come out ready and physical to play. We got beat by 40 and got embarrassed. And I just want to see how the team responds after a year later. AJ, what you got?
Yeah, so a little bit of history here. JMU is 2-1 all time against the Chants. They've won 2 straight. However, their only loss came in Conway. So that's something to note. So other things to note here, again, like you said, Jay, they're coming off a big time loss, right? They're going to come back ready, fired up, ready for this one. Coastal needs it badly, right? JMU's top 25 in 18 different categories. Like, this is a really good team. The Dukes are first in the country in rushing defense, yards per carry allowed, sacks, and tackles for loss. Like, these guys are menaces. And I said, this is a big time team, and they're going to be hungry for this one. So there's a lot on the table here.
Now that we know a bit about JMU's season so far, let's transition over the James Madison players to look out for. AJ, who do you have?
Yeah, so offensively, I'm going wide receiver, number 1, Reggie Brown. This season, 952 yards, 8 touchdowns, right? A guy that's going to be, flying around the field at all times. And I'm expecting, him to be an impact in this one. And defensively, I'm going with number 10 defensive lineman Jalen Green. This guy's an absolute menace on the defensive front. 50 total tackles, however, 21 tackle for loss, 15 and a half sacks, a pick, 2 forced fumbles. All right, this guy is one. He's gonna be an absolute menace, and one of those guys that leads into that defensive front for JMU. And he's gonna be a problem for us, I think. But Jay, who do you have?
Obviously, on offense, you got to go with their QB transfer in, Jalen McLeod. I mean, the last 2 years they've had transfer QBs in, and they've worked out pretty well for them. I mean, McLeod's a transfer from Arizona. He has 27 passing touchdowns with 7 rushing touchdowns and only 8 picks. So he's very smart with the football and makes good decisions. And he also, for his career high in touchdowns, he had 6 when they played at Utah State. And we're just going to have to keep him in the pocket and get pressure on him in order to have a good day. And then on defense, I have Jalen Walker, who's a Virginia native, and he had a season high of 10 total tackles against Marshall, 51 total tackles on the season, which is second on the team with 4.5 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. And if we don't block him, he's going to have a field day with our offensive line, and we're going to have to block him to make sure that we come out with a win on Saturday afternoon.
Now that we know a few of the key players to keep an eye out for on the JMU roster, let's transition over to how Coastal Carolina can beat JMU for the Sun Belt East title. Jay, what do you got?
Obviously, for all the marbles, I mean, to begin the season, we didn't think we would be at this point, but you got to give props to the team, the coaching staff. In our first year, it's a great testament to Coach Moglia hiring Coach Beck and him bringing in the right kids and right coaches to get us to this point, and we're going to have to start out fast like we usually do. I mean, JMU is a very good team, and if we don't start out fast and get some 3-and-outs, then we're going to be in for a long dogfight in order to come out with the Sun Belt East title on Saturday. AJ, what you got?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to sound like an absolute broken record here. But, this is probably the most important game of the season. I think that's, non-controversial at this point. But again, here we go. Need a hot start and strong finish. Absolutely need it. Again, I say it basically every week, but the reason being is because when we do it, we're going to put ourselves in a good spot. When we don't do it, we put ourselves in a really bad spot, right? It's a lot easier said than done, but again, you have to have it. Again, this team's going to come out ready to play, and you're going to have to shut them down quick, get your fans involved, everything like that. With that being said, we have to pack Brooks. Again, I don't care who's there. Whatever it is, tell your mom, grandma, sister, uncles, dogs, fishes, cat, whoever it is, got to pack Brooks, right? We need as many people there in the stands as possible. Got to get loud, got to be involved. Got to be there, and you have to stay there, right? You got to get involved early, stay there late, right? Make that difference, right? You hear about, all these schools that have those big time home field advantages. Nobody wants to play there, right? Toughest places to play. We need to become one of those schools. And then as far as the team goes, you need to stay disciplined, locked in. It's going to be a long game, going to be a dogfight. You're going to have to, battle every down, every snap. All hands on deck, right? Whoever it is that's playing has to be, ready to go, especially in this QB situation, right? All hands on deck. I think this quarterback situation is interesting. My hope, and now this might be just, I hope it's a chess play here, right? Because, we've said that we have our doubts with Jared Guest. I hope that Vasco, even though he hasn't been announced as a guy, might be the guy in this one. I think it's a chess play because what we just talked about with Army, how you need, you want to keep JMU on their heels, right? If it's a quarterback like Vasco, you have to prepare all week for a guy like that, right? Where he's going to run, it's going to be more of option looks, right? RPOs, all that stuff. It's going to take a lot more to prepare for. Meanwhile, Guest is more of the straight up pocket passer type of guy. So I'm hoping that's a chess play and that they're trying to get JMU to prepare for Guest, and then you run Vasco out there and you catch them off guard on their heels. That's what I'm hoping is the case, although that may not be, right? It might just be they go with Guest because they believe he's the guy. However, because he has been QB number 2 in the depth chart pretty much all year. I'm interested to see how that works. And again, as I said, you have to have this game. You need it. Whatever it takes, whatever you got to do, you have to have this win. So, again, it's going to be all hands on deck, grind it out, find a way to win.
Now that we know what it takes for Coastal Carolina to potentially beat JMU on Saturday for the Sun Belt East title, let's switch over the Coastal Carolina players to watch out for in this game. AJ, who do you have?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a little bit of a straight up play here. I'm going with wide receiver Jared Brown on the offense. Last game, 8 catches, 116 yards, touchdown. He's just one of those guys where he's not the, throw it to him all the time, but it's here's a screen, here's just hand it off. He's all over the field. They get the ball in his hands in a lot of different ways. I think that's really important in a game like this where you might not have the ability to hurl a deep ball to Jamison Tucker somewhere, right? It's going to be more of progressively working your way down the field, right? This is a disciplined JMU defense, and they're not necessarily going to give you that home run ball all the time. So you're going to have to find, shorter routes, shorter passes, and then work your way downfield, and you have to make guys miss in the open field. I think this is Jared Brown's forte. Defensively, this is a tough one, but I'm going with Keontae Lusk. Last game, 4 total tackles, 2 solo, and the pick last week. But for me, I think that the big thing here is that these JMU receivers are a problem. They run the ball well, but I think they are definitely a better passing team than they are a running team, at least in my opinion. So again, this is where your defensive backs come into play. And I think he's going to be forced to mark some tough receivers. And I think he's going to have to do that effectively if we want to be able to hang in this one. But Jay, what do you have?
Obviously, everybody's question is going to be for my offense. I'm going to go with the quarterback room. I mean, we're going to have to figure out soon, or we're going to be surprised come Saturday first series who trots out there for Coastal and takes the snap under center the first series. I mean, is it going to be Jared Guest, the senior, in his final game potentially at Brooks, or is it going to be the future Ethan Vasco? Is he going to come out and play like he did against his 2 wins on the season, or are we going to have a third one? Number 10 makes his final curtain call at Brooks Stadium. I mean, we just don't know yet. And for defense, I'm going to sound like a broken record, dead horse, but I got to go with Michael Mason. I mean, the hometown kid in his final home game at Brooks Stadium. I want to see what he does, and does he have the swarm locked in like they did in previous games, and are we going to be able to stop JMU's high-powered offense and come out there with a win on Saturday? Hunter, who you got?
Ladies and gentlemen of Teal Nation, for the first time in multiple weeks, I'm back in with key players to watch for Coastal Carolina. I've taken a step back and decided to let my boys make a couple picks here and see how weeks plays out. And so far, it actually played out pretty well up until the Army game. So this week, I'm kind of jumping back in there. For offense, I got Kendall Carr. Of the last, couple of weeks, we've seen him get more and more targets. I believe he caught a couple passes. I want to say 3, but maybe more against Army. When you have a really good tight end, not just catching passes in the red zone, but catching passes like in the middle of the field, you're opening up the game for your offense, right? Your receivers are probably going to get more open targets when your tight end potentially gets double covered. Maybe it helps out your running game a little bit more, but we need our offense to be flowing, right? We need to take a lot more shots downfield. And if we're not going to take a lot more shots downfield, then we need to get this run game going. And you can't get that going without a solid pass game or like a super really good offensive line. And that's not to say that ours isn't, but obviously at earlier points in this season, I think we definitely questioned the offensive line's capability. But either way, I think, a guy like Kendall Carr going out there getting about 7 or 8 catches, which you might think is ridiculous, but I think that's ideal for a game against an opponent like JMU with their talent. As AJ pointed out, they're ranked in 18 different categories. So we're going to need your key players to go out there and make some key plays. And I just think Kendall Carr opening up the offense would definitely help guys like Jared Brown and Sam Pinckney get more open, maybe less double coverage and more one-on-one coverage when they're having to double up the tight end who keeps getting the ball over and over again. Think back to the days of Isaiah Likely, where, if the receivers weren't getting open, Likely's gone. And even if he's not gone, he's getting these catches. He's going out of bounds. Maybe if we're, in a time crunch, or maybe he's just in an open field catching, in the middle or catching about 10 yards deep. So, hey, either way, I think Kendall Carr is the guy to look out for in this game. Hopefully we get the tight ends rolling. And the defense, this has been my pick throughout the majority of the season. Clayton Isbell. I mean, listen, you need a threat on that defense that's going to shake up this really good receiving core for JMU. And Clayton Isbell's the playmaker. He can go in there and he can even get a sack against the quarterback to rattle him. But also, if these receivers are really coming in the Cook and Conway, there's no player on this defense I'd be on the lookout more to disrupt them, lay some big hits, maybe even get an interception potentially. Because if you roll back the tape, who are the best receivers we've played prior to this game? I can tell you right now, it's UCLA. There might be a couple other teams that have some decent wide receivers, but UCLA, and look at what Isbell was doing. There were multiple times where he had a shot at an interception. I don't blame him for not getting it, but he went after it. He tried to get the interception multiple times in that game. He was pressing up against 4- and 5-star receivers. I have a lot of faith in this guy. I think he's a juggernaut. When he comes to play, he comes to play. So if we can get Clayton Isbell out there rocking the team, getting that black swarm rolling, I think Clayton Isbell is going to make some key plays in this game to help get Coastal Carolina the victory. Now that we have the Coastal Carolina players to look out for in this game, let's switch over to the Keeping Up with the Shots segment with AJ and Jay. Gentlemen, take it away.
Obviously, our volleyball team, they did what they're used to doing, winning the Sun Belt Championship. I mean, we did break another NCAA record this week with freshman from Gainesville, Florida, Jaden Stout, notching her 14th triple-double of the season. And they will wait their destination come Sunday, where they will be headed for the first round of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, so now I'll shift it over to the other sports in the HGC Center here with the basketball teams. But first, obviously, we'd like to congratulate the volleyball team on Sun Belt Championship. Bringing home hardware, that's what we need, especially because the basketball teams are probably not going to do that. On the women's side, they actually have won 3 in a row, so that makes them now 3-2. They've done both basketball teams now are playing your Carolina Lesser Division One programs, right? Your Furmans, UNC Greensboro, UNCW, North Carolina Central States, USC Upstate. You got it. You got the point. So they're all playing those teams out of conference right now, and they've won 3 in a row. So they have the 2 losses to ACC programs, and they've beaten some of the other ones, so they're above 500. They play UNCW on Sunday, and then they'll play UNC Greensboro on Wednesday. Looking for them to continue their momentum as, again, like we said, we have a little bit of hope for this women's team this year. Now to the men's team, update, still terrible. Fire Cliff Ellis, 1-3 overall now as they have lost 3 in a row. That's so, this past weekend they played the Myrtle Beach Invitational, and they lost all 3 games they played in that Invitational. Now, granted, there were some decent teams in that tournament. I will give them that, but definitely not the start you'd like. Now, they play NC Central on Sunday. Hopefully, they can get a bounce-back game there. And then USC Upstate on Wednesday. So like I said, they're looking for anything they can, trying to string wins together. I remember I was watching one of the Myrtle Beach Invitational games, and I thought to myself, I don't know basically anybody on this team. And I watched a decent amount of games last year. And then you look at them, it's because everybody transfers out or leaves, which is a problem with this program. Again, I think the biggest thing here, I'm not going to touch on it too much, is that we just need a new head coach over there. Change up the culture a little bit, right? And you have to get that program back on track, right? You have to bring some juice back in that program, because right now it's not too great. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how these programs progress. Obviously, once you get into conference play, it doesn't matter what you did outside of conference play. But so far, men's team not looking so great. Women's team are going to be average.
And now that concludes our Keeping Up with the Shots segment. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's transition over to our final segment of the day, the final week of Sun Belt Pick'ems to determine it all. Sure, we didn't start the podcast or the Sun Belt Pick'ems until halfway through the season, but that doesn't change anything. We still had a whole half of the season to predict games and have a true competition between the 3 members of the Keeping It Teal podcast. Right now, AJ is back in the lead with a 25-11 record, even though last week he was 5-4. I'm in second place at 23-13 with a horrible 4-5 week. And Jay also had a 4-5 week, leaving him off at 22-14, only 1 game below me. So while AJ looks like he's about to get the crown for the Sun Belt Pick'ems of the Keeping It Teal podcast, there are still 7 games that stand in the way of AJ Moran winning this. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin the chaos of the final regular season week of the Sun Belt Pick'ems. And for our game 1, we are starting with Troy at Southern Miss. AJ, who are you taking?
Yeah, I mean, just an overview on this one. This one actually might be a little interesting, just because I think Troy, that now they have clinched the West, they're going to obviously, dial back a little bit, right? Some of these starters might sit out, right? They might not, or they only play limited snaps, right? This might not be exert yourself too much game for them. However, Southern Miss is, not too good. They're terrible, in fact. So I'm going to have to go with Troy this one. Like I said, disappointing season for Southern Miss. Poor Frank Gore Jr. I think he's officially done now. So that dude, is gonna finally be out of their hands. And like I said, even with backups playing potentially for Troy, I think they still find a way to win in this one.
Jay, who are you taking this game?
Obviously, Southern Miss is not good. Troy is the West Division champion. Give me Troy big on Saturday.
All right. And I am also taking Troy. I just don't feel like this is the kind of game where you can bet against the Sun Belt West champs. All right, let's switch over to our second of the 7 games for this week. Georgia State at Old Dominion. AJ, what do you got for this one?
This one's actually interesting, right? These are one of the ones that are going to make and break who wins this thing. Georgia State 6-5, Old Dominion 5-6. Old Dominion needs this one, right? Season on the line here, at home, right? However, this is a tough one because this one was probably my hardest pick this week. Just because, like I said, this one's such a 50-50 toss up. But I'm going with the Panthers this week. Both teams have had a rough couple games here, like rough stretches. But I just think Georgia State's going to be ready to play with some extra momentum this week, and I'm going to go with the Panthers.
All right, Jay, let's hear what you have for this one.
Obviously, ODU with a big win last week down in Statesboro against Georgia Southern. I see ODU bouncing back, getting their 6th win of the season, and having Georgia on their mind and making it back to a bowl game for the first time in a while. So give me the Monarchs on Saturday.
Believe it or not, I also had Old Dominion picked before we went through this, and I also want to make sure that I can win this over AJ. So I'm good. I'm taking against AJ, but I also already plan on taking Old Dominion. They just seem like the better team. Like if this Georgia State team had not collapsed, I would probably be picking with AJ. But that team went from 100 to 0. I mean, they came in and had the biggest margin of victory over Coastal Carolina this year, more than UCLA, right? With the amount of points that they put up on us at home as well, right? To being a team right now that I think Old Dominion is not only going to beat, but beat by 20 points. I think Old Dominion is going to absolutely have a crazy home crowd hoping to get a bowl game. Let's go, Old Dominion. And let's move on to ULM at Louisiana. AJ, who are you taking?
Yeah, this one's a no-brainer for me. I'm going with the Cajuns. ULM again, another disappointing year. They are the worst team in the Sun Belt. At 2-9 this year, like I said, another rough one for them. Although I don't think we expected anything different. The Cajuns now they need this one for a bowl game too. That's a little added in. 5-6. They need it. Their season's on the line. They're at home, and I think there's just too much on the line for them to throw this one. So I'm going with the Cajuns.
Jay, are you taking that Cajun spice?
Yeah, I'm taking that Cajun spice. I mean, what can we expect from ULM? ULM's like your little brother nobody wants to have, but they still are there with you. So give me the Cajuns big on Saturday in the rivalry game against ULM.
For me, I was always going to take Louisiana this one, but I got to say, ULM at first, they impressed me last week in the first half, holding Ole Miss to only 7 points, a 7-3. And then Ole Miss came out and beat the snot out of them in the second half. But listen, ULM probably had the best half of football this entire season in the first half against Ole Miss. So let that sink in. But yes, we're all going to be taking the Cajuns in this one. Let's switch over to the biggest rivalry game of the week. I think Coastal versus JMU will slowly shape into one of those. But Georgia Southern at App. AJ, what do you got?
Yeah, this is a big one. For a multitude of different reasons. Especially as Coastal fans, this is a tremendous game for us. App State now is at 7-4. Georgia Southern is at 6-5. This one has big Sunbelt East, implications on it. So we need Georgia Southern to win this week at the Rock, and that's what I'm going with. We need the Eagles to go into Boone and win. App State decided to mess things up by beating James Madison last week. So in retaliation mode, let's go Gata, and let's go with the Eagles this week.
Jay, who are you taking this rivalry matchup?
In this rivalry matchup, I mean, I picked App State previous this year, but what we need to happen is Davis Brin and Georgia Southern to go into the Rock and get us a win on Saturday afternoon. So that's what I'm going with. Davis Brin and Clay Helton getting the big win Saturday and helping out us Chanticleers by beating the App State Boonies on Saturday afternoon.
Well, gentlemen, I'm playing the win. And right now, App State's the only team to have beaten JMU. They came in, they balled. After we went in there and disrespected them and got the W in Boone, they turned around. I mean, they had a couple iffy quarters here and there, but their team completely turned around, right? They've been going out and they've been balling week in and week out, including against a ranked JMU, ending their undefeated season. That was the most fun outside of watching Coastal football this year. And some people might be like, well, you clearly don't watch SEC or Big Ten football. It's like, yes, I have, but I don't have grudges against some of these teams. I clearly don't like either of the two teams that were playing last week, but just watching them beat up on each other, watching the 26,000+ fans at JMU going absolutely bonkers, and then less than 60 seconds later, it's almost pure silence after an App State victory. I think the boys in Boone are going to go out and get the dub. Do I think they're winning the East? I didn't say that, but they're definitely going to go in at home and get the dub in this rivalry matchup, App State. All right, now we're moving on to Arkansas State at Marshall. AJ, who you got?
Yeah, this one's actually another tough one, right? This is another make or break. Arkansas State's at 6-5. Marshall's at 5-6. Both Marshall needs it for a bowl game here, and I think they're going to get it. I think Marshall at home. Again, season on the line. It's been a very, very rough season for them, for the herd. But I think that they're just going to be able to find a way to win in this one. Like I said, when the season's on the line, right, you get more out of your players, right, and there's other things that come from it. And I think Marshall's going to come up and deliver on Saturday.
Jay, what about you? Who you have in this matchup?
As in the great words of our president, Mr. AJ Moran, these are the two battles up mid. I mean, the Red Puppies and the Thunder and Herd. Two teams are in the middle of the pack of the conference. And after last week's showing by Jalen Rayner and the Red Puppies, give me the Red Puppies pulling the upset on Saturday in Huntington, West Virginia.
I also think the Red Puppies are rolling. I think they got a really great young quarterback, and I think this is a guy we're going to have to pay more attention to over time. Realistically, whether or not they keep their coach is interesting, but I think if they get this W, go 7-5, I think they will be keeping their head coach. And I think over time, if they can get more recruits out there, they could be some real competition in the Sun Belt West with that young quarterback. I think back to, yes, McCall had the undefeated freshman season. McCall definitely significantly better necessarily than Jalen of the Red Puppies, but I think Jalen is still a really productive freshman quarterback for Arkansas State. And I think if they can build off of that, this could be a team that's like a 2 to 3 loss team for the next couple years until he goes either to the NFL, transfers, graduates, whatever. But I truthfully do believe this kid can cook. And I think this team is rolling. So I'm also taking the Red Puppies. And let's move over to the Coastal Carolina game of the week, JMU at CCU. AJ, who are you taking?
Yeah, again, our bias pick of the week here. I'm going to have to go with the Chants. I do think, right, this is a very, very good James Madison team. Coastal's going to have their hands full. I know for a fact that this is possible, right? There is a way that Coastal could pull this one out, but it's going to take, right, like I said, every man in that locker room, and everyone's going to have to play their best brand of football. Listen, I know that we can do it, and I believe that we will do it to clinch ourselves a Sun Belt East championship. Can't leave it up to anybody else, right? Can't depend on Georgia Southern, winning or App State losing. Right? We can't depend on that. Let's just go out, take care of business, do what we know how to do, play our brand of football, right? Let's win this game, and no questions.
Okay, Jay, who are you taking?
Obviously, gotta go keeping it till here. I mean, we all went to Coastal. We gotta go with the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers here. I mean, we got faith in the team to come out Saturday and put on a better performance than they did last year in Harrisonburg to conclude the regular season. And I think the Chants winning by a decent margin on Saturday and booking us a ticket back to the Sun Belt Championship in Troy, Alabama.
All righty. I'll bring this right back to the beginning of the podcast. This might not be better than last year, even though last year was a train wreck towards the end. This season might not be better, or definitely is not better than the first two seasons under McCall, under the undefeated season and the 2-loss season. But this still is a significantly better Coastal Carolina football team than the pre-McCall era. Heck, some could even argue, even though we have one more loss than we did last year, that this team is significantly better than the team last year. All right. We just had a little bit of a tougher schedule and the Sun Belt's gotten a little bit better. I can't pick against my Chants when we are a game away from, potentially being in the Sun Belt Conference Championship. Now, if we were a Coastal Carolina team with only 4 wins going into this, I'd have to play realism here and pick JMU for that. But that's not what happened. We didn't roll over after multiple losses. We kept fighting till the end, just like our victory fight song. So I'm taking our shots and we move on to the last game of our Sun Belt Pick'ems regular season. South Alabama at Texas State. AJ, who are you taking?
Again, this is another interesting one for me. You got, again, another battle of mid, baby. Let's go. 2 6-5 programs, right? Both these teams have made a bowl game. I'm going with the Jaguars this week. They have actually been a sleeper for me in the Sun Belt. I think this was a team that everyone just kind of brushes off and is like, all right, they're just kind of there. Again, they're just kind of mid. But I think this is a better team, right, than a lot of people thought they would be. So I'm going with them this week. I think another thing to note too is Texas State was started off really, really hot. They clinched their bowl game and they have struggled badly recently. They barely sneaked one out against ULM in their last one, right? Then lost to Troy, beat Georgia Southern somehow, but then lost to us, lost to Arkansas State bad. Like that was 77-31. They lost to the Red Puppies, right? Like this team got their bowl game and then they just looked like a completely different team after that. So it's been rough for them. And like I said, I think South Alabama is a better team than what most people may think. So give me the Jaguars in this one.
Jay, who are you taking in this final matchup?
Obviously, the final matchup of our Sun Belt Pick'ems, after getting embarrassed by the Red Puppies last week and giving up 77 points, I see TJ Finley and Texas State defending their home turf and getting the win to conclude the regular season. So give me the Bobcats on Saturday.
And for the final pick for me and the entire group of the Keeping It Till podcast for the final game, I'm taking South Alabama. Kind of pretty much what everything AJ said. This offense is just dominant. You have, if I'm not mistaken, Oklahoma State is either ranked or like very close to, from being ranked and falling out. South Alabama beat them. Yes, South Alabama's season is not ideal, but they have proven one thing. Their offense is crazy good when they go out and ball. All right. They have the ability to compete with just about any team out there offensively. Their defense is just atrocious. If you can go out there and score on that defense and limit the amount of time that South Alabama's offense has for time of possession, you can win that fairly easily. That's why the record is what it is, right? You just have to go out there and be more dominant than them. If you don't show your ability to go out there and dog it out right away, South Alabama's going to sniff you out and start putting up points. So that's what it is right now. And Texas State, as Jay pointed out, has just proven that, you can go out there and ring up 70-some points on them. All right. So listen, I just don't see a reason right now to go against the Jaguars of South Alabama, and they will be my final pick and the final pick for all of us in the Keeping It Teal podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to discussing who won, how it all played out with that, what's going to happen next. Are we going to the Sun Belt Conference Championship against Troy, or are we just talking about what our next bowl game is? So much is up in the air. Let's pack Brooks. I'm excited to see how this all plays out, and we'll see you in the next Keeping It Teal podcast. Thank you for listening to our latest episode of the Keeping It Teal podcast. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube, X, Instagram, and Spotify to keep up to date with all things Teal. Until next time, good night, Teal Nation.